Hey everyone, my name's Vince Gelman. It has certainly been a while since I've created a video, and I'm excited to do so now and to share some new information with you, specifically about the Holy Cross, the mystical, multi-dimensional portal, the vehicle of transmutation that is the sacred, the mystical cross. I want to bring you some enlightening perspectives, something different maybe that you haven't heard before about the cross. And I want to make abundantly clear right now that I'm not a religious person. I'm not against religion, although I do recognize it has caused untold amount of suffering on the planet. But this isn't a video to bash religion, but I do need to make abundantly clear I'm not a religious person. If in fact the work I do, transmitting the frequencies of Ascended Master Jesus, of Mahavatar Babaji, of Kuan Yin and other Ascended Masters, of spirit animals, of crystalline frequencies like diamond and emerald, working with the Holy Order of Kings and the Council of Shamanic Elders, that work would be considered quite blasphemous amongst many religious folk. So I'm definitely not a religious person, but I do love Jesus. I love the Holy Cross. And in fact, this last weekend, I did an online healing and activation ceremony with Jesus one day and with Mahavatar Babaji another day. And I will be repeating those ceremonies this upcoming weekend on Zoom. I'll put information in the description. So Jesus is someone I turn to once in a while and for support. And he said something to me a few months back that I absolutely loved because it it ties in with my love of wordplay. He said it's time to stop seeing the cross as a symbol. We must now see the cross as an altar that alters consciousness, an altar that alters consciousness. How cool is that? The cross is an altar that alters consciousness. Now, I've spent a lot of time at my altar right over there, over my left shoulder, and it's certainly been a powerful portal that has altered my consciousness tremendously. Now, if you love your altar as I love my altar, you know the power that an altar has to alter consciousness. And the reason why it alters consciousness is because we take it to heart. We take it to heart. We give our vulnerability to it. We approach it ceremonially. And that's what Jesus did when he willingly went to the cross. He gave his heart to it. He gave his vulnerability to it. And it was a ceremony, a huge act he prepared his life for. It was a huge ceremonial act, and obviously a great sacrifice. That cross was his altar. And that cross that was his altar altered his consciousness. It rebirthed him. It transfigured him. And so that's what altars do when we take them to heart. We carry that altar in our heart. I carry my altar wherever I go in my heart because I love my altar. It's become part of me. It has become part of my heart, my bones, my cells, my soul, my mind. I'm one with my altar. I love it. It's in me. And so what Jesus wants that he communicated to me is that we're here to live the way of the cross. We're here to embody it. We're here to bring that cross to our heart, the holy cross to our heart, the mystical, multi-dimensional cross to our heart, and to live it as an altar in our heart. Now, how do we do that? What does it mean to live the way of the cross? What does it mean to bring it into our heart? Well, if we look at the cross, there's obviously the horizontal axis and the vertical axis. And what I want to offer to you is maybe a different perspective. We often associate the horizontal axis as being the plane of the physical, and the vertical axis as being the plane of the spiritual. That's quite known, that's quite accepted. But I want to take this a step further and say that the horizontal axis is the plane of vulnerability, is the plane of vulnerability. And that cross is the intersection, represents the intersection of our vulnerable human self with our invincible spirit, our invincible spirit. That the cross is a symbol. Well, I just caught myself there. It is an altar that represents the intersection, the communion of our vulnerable human selves, our vulnerable experience with the invincibility of our higher self. In terms of the latter, our spirit is invincible, our holy self is invincible, our innocence is invincible. Yes, we get wounded as human beings and we close off from that holiness within, but we don't tarnish it. We don't reduce it in any way. We just turn from it. It's like clouds covering the sunlight. The sun doesn't get harmed in any way. It just gets shrouded by the clouds. So that sunlight, that solar essence of ours is invincible. And here we are in the human experience that is very vulnerable. I mean, I don't have to convince you how vulnerable it is. We experience loss, we experience pain, we experience grief, anger, disgust, shame. We experience tragedy of all kinds, and ultimately we experience the demise, the sickness, the loss of health and death. We go through so much in this human experience. It is truly a very humbling experience. It is meant to be humbling. Being in a body, being in the human body is meant to be humbling. It's meant to be humbling because that is what opens our heart, is actually our humility. Jesus said, blessed are the poor in spirit. So blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Poor does not mean, and this is what Christians believe, poor does not mean that you have to get down on your knees and reach a rock bottom place of being unworthy, of admitting you're not worthy so you can give yourself over to Jesus and receive, experience, get salvation. That's not what poor in spirit means. Poor in spirit means those who have been humbled, who have emptied, who have wept, who know what it's like to experience loss, who know what it's like to feel a depth of grief that tragedy often brings. And what's interesting after that verse, after Jesus says, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven, the sentence right after is blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Isn't it interesting that the term mourning is used right after poor in spirit? So that's the thing, is that the human experience is vulnerable, and it brings us to a deep place of mourning, to grief, to being that, to experiencing that vulnerability. So if we look at Jesus and how he lived, how he taught, how he interacted with the public, he spent his time with the outsiders. He spent his time with the sick and the poor and the ostracized, the lepers. He wasn't spending his time with the aristocrats. He wasn't spending his time with the elites. He was spending time with those who were poor in spirit. And so So what I want to offer you is that when we are poor in spirit, when we are in that place of vulnerability, that's when we actually are most available to the vertical access of the cross. That's when we're most available to spirit, to the kingdom of heaven. That's our crucifixion, is when we actually go into that place of heartbreak and we break down. And in breaking down, we break open our heart. And in breaking open our heart, we break free into the kingdom of heaven. And the kingdom of heaven for me really is your own Christ light, your Buddha light, if you want to call it that. It's your holy higher self that then descends like a dove into your DNA and takes hold into your heart and human awareness. So this is the blessing of vulnerability. You know, a lot of spiritual growth, a lot of spiritual teachings is around noticing your ego, noticing your thoughts, noticing the small I, disidentification from that I, being aware of it. And yet there's so much more than that. It's very easy to bypass your humanity if you make your spiritual path simply about trying to disassociate, disidentify from the ego and making the ego bad. Because that's the other thing that can happen in some of these spiritual paths, is that we can make the ego bad. You know, some algorithm that we should just simply avoid at all costs. What's missing is what it means to be human, and that we are not here to skip that. We're not here to avoid suffering. We didn't come here to avoid suffering. We came here to experience suffering, to learn through suffering, to be humbled by suffering, and to open to the vertical axis through that heartbreak. As Rumi said, Rumi, the Sufi poet, the mystical poet, said, and I'm paraphrasing, when life brings you to your knees, you're in the perfect position to pray. And so those two axes, the vertical and the horizontal, intersect at the heart. Intersect at the heart. That is the chalice. That is the center point, the cardinal center point, where we birth open to our Christ light. That chalice is where is what gets filled when we open to that vertical plane of light. It gets filled as we break open. It's so tempting. It's so tempting to rescue people from their suffering. I know that feeling. I know what it's like. It's especially difficult when there are people that are close to us, family, friends. It's hard to see people suffer. But the moment that they're experiencing suffering, maybe something that they've been preparing for many lifetimes, their knees just about to hit earth. And they've been waiting for this surrender for many, many lifetimes. And who are we to take them away from that life-changing moment? Who are we to take away that moment when they place themselves on the cross? When they truly offer themselves to the cross? When they give themselves over to the cross and they live the way of the cross? Who are we to rescue them from that? And the more we take the cross to heart and live it as a sacred altar, the more we befriend our own vulnerability, the more space we can create for others to be with their own, and the less of an impulse we have to rescue people from theirs. So this is one perspective on the way, the wisdom of the cross, that I invite you to take to heart. And if you want to bring more of the cross to your heart, I invite you to come to the online ceremony I have this weekend. I I think we'll be working with Jesus. Yes, Jesus on, it's called Jesus Christ Healing and Activation. It's at noon. Oops, sorry, it's at 3 p.m. Pacific this Saturday. And Mahavatar Babaji will be noon Pacific on Sunday. I think I got that right. So 3 p.m. Pacific on this Saturday with Jesus, Healing and Activation, Jesus Christ Healing and Activation. And Sunday will be noon Pacific with Mahavatar Babaji. And these are online ceremonies. They're 77 Canadian. They're 75 minutes each. And I'll put information in the, in the description. And you don't, if you can't make the time, you can still receive the transmission in full, whether you're sleeping or working or traveling. Thank you so much, and please share this video. Please like it, leave your comments. It's been an honor to be with you here today. Thank you.